Up until I was 15, I hardly left the town that I was born in, and I was working on a farm, local farm. And then I used to see the cars zooming past on the road and think, as I was there, haymaking, which is just cutting the grass and watching it dry in the sun and rolling it over and feeding it to the cows every year, I started thinking there must be something going on out there. And as soon as I travelled, I went to Liverpool and I saw the cavern. And that made me sort of decide that I really want to, A, be in a group, and B, travel the world. And since then, I haven't stopped. I barely will stay in one place more than 6 months at a time. It's just one of those things. I really enjoy moving around.
We played support to Jethro Tull on the first tour. And America never really seen anything like ours. We gradually built up a following over here, and you knew that Yes was going to, do something over here. They were definitely going to go a long way. And I knew at the end of that American tour. And then we went back to England and played a big concert, which was my last concert at Crystal Palace. And suddenly there was, the first concert, there was thousands and thousands of people there. So. And I left after that. That was my last concert with them. So I knew that it was going to be big, but it wasn't for me at that time.
Well, that's Roundabout. The song was one John Anderson had begun writing in the group's early days.
That was written in Scotland on one of our first tours of Great Britain. And we were writing the song in the van as we were going towards what seemed, it was a big roundabout on the way to Glasgow. And I started singing, "We'll be the roundabout." The words will make you out and out. I can't even remember the words now. But the idea was that Yes, as a group, was in a way sort of a cycle thing. It was something that people could evolve around, ourselves included. And the idea was just that we were just a group. We go playing to people and 24 before My Love, I'll Be There With You. It was 24 hours before we got back to London after we played these Scottish gigs. We were playing Glasgow. And the idea was that we're sort of a roundabout in a way, like a magic roundabout. The main feeling about bringing in Roger Dean was to stamp a sort of visual thing to the band, because we didn't think we were very visual to look at. We weren't Mick Jagger or Bowie or very outward-going people. We were very sort of introverted on stage visually. We just play our music. We thought we were just musicians and that was it. And we didn't have to dance around to prove any point. We just had to play our music. So we had to cover that by adding more texture and colour to the staging and the record sleeves. And Roger Dean was perfect to bring out the colour of the music in a way, the texture of the music and art. And that was one of the reasons why we used Roger.
I didn't immediately know I was going to play the guitar. But once I started playing, having a brother who was older kept influencing me, and he quite early said, "All this rock guitars is a right load of rubbish. Listen to this." He gave me a record by Barney Kessel, jazz guitar record. And I went right into jazz, like a lot, and found Django, Charlie Christian, Tal Farlow. But then I didn't, forget pop. I liked Chet Atkins, and he was one of the guitarists I liked a lot. But then things started turning, and Zappa, and the guitar bands of the late 60s, like the Byrds, and had phenomenal guitar playing on them. And it was that country style of playing that really bent my ear quite a lot. I got into classical music more or less through the flute, oddly enough, because I like the flute. I heard classical music for the flute the first time, and that's when I knew I was going to have to check all this out.
It was called And You and I, Anderson remembers.
I was going through this incredible self-realization and trying to understand why I wasn't that happy with religion. I tend to find, I was finding out then that all religions met the same ocean. So if they're all the same, why are they always arguing? How can Protestants and Catholic keep arguing and the Jewish and Arab conflict keep going. And it's all based on religion or deep-rooted fear or deep-rooted guilt. And that period of time, I was reading Siddhartha and Hermann Hesse, who was writing a lot of sort of esoteric books about self-realization. It's all got to do with how you perceive the world. So it was and you and I, you being the operative outward energy, and I being the operative inward energy.
My opinion changes, and at the moment, one of the things that changes least is that Close to the Edge has a certain polish and finesse about it that I like very much. Unfortunately, when we finished it, Bill Bruford had left, so I was disappointed at that time a lot, although very, very happy with the record then, as I still am. I think it's an adventurous record. It's the first 20-minute piece we did, and for that reason, it marked a serious development in the possibility of, for Yes, what we could do. From then, we went from 10-minute numbers to 20-minute numbers, and then we made a whole album of 20-minute numbers. So we really did start something that was really very hard to control.
White's interest in percussion started at an early age.
I was playing the piano from the age of 6, and when I was 13, my uncle, who was a drummer, said that I was playing the piano rather percussively, like pounding on the notes quite a bit. So they got me a kit of drums, and within 3 months I was playing on stage after that, even while I was still at school. So it seemed to be some kind of a career building for me. So when I left school, that's all I've done.
Mraz continues.
I had to learn 9 albums of Yes's material in a couple of weeks or whatever, during actually, and recording at the same time, relayer. So it was a very big, learning and very intense period of my life there, and then getting ready to go on tour in the States. I had been in the States before, but I had never played in the States, and although I was playing big concerts with Refugee and selling out, festivals and our own 3,000-seaters, to jump from a 3,000-seater to a 15,000-seater or 20,000-seater arena or whatever is a big jump, And I was like imagining this, and it was very strange, It went all so quick.
Tormato. John Anderson reflects back on that project.
At the time, we were not a happy group. And it was like a marriage. It wasn't going very well. And we were putting songs together for an album. We hadn't had a break from each other. We'd been together 10 years solidly, in the studio, on the road. Maybe a break of 2 or 3 months here and there, but nothing substantial enough to be able to get on with each other. At that time, we just didn't get on as a group. And there was a place called Yes Tour. Nobody knows quite what tours really are. They believe there's something to do with the pyramid idea. Because underneath a tour, a hill, are some chambers, but nobody's quite sure why they were made. One of them we found was called Yes Tour. So we had this cover made, and it was all a guy with divining rods and trying to find oil or water or gold or magical things. And the cover looked really cool, but we weren't really having a good time making the album. So I said, I don't think we should call it Yes Tour. We should call it Yes Tomato. Somebody had the bright idea of throwing a tomato at the cover and did so. And then somebody took a photograph, and that became the album cover. Because we were just taking the rise out of ourselves. I think we've become a bit too serious. And Yes Tomato was, the Tomato album, was the culmination of not really knowing where to go. And that's why after that...
Anderson left for other reasons.
It takes a long time to make Yes music. I think that's because of the great talent within the group. It's a problem and it's also a gift. it seemed to be taking too long for my energy, and I wasn't enjoying it. It wasn't fulfilling my time. I started to work with Vangelis, who had been a friend for 5 or 6 years before, and I started to work with him. So it was like working at the opposite end of the scale. With Vangelis, it was spontaneous. It took 3 weeks to make the album, the first one we ever did, and that was, for me, a sort of release. Over and above the business, the band will survive. The musicians will survive, because the band was originally put together to go on stage and perform to people. It wasn't put together to go make an album or a hit single. It was put on stage to perform and entertain people, and 20 years later we're still doing the same thing.
With Jeff on drama, the last Yes record, and the Asia records, Jeff and I became sparring partners for some time in all sorts of different situations. And really from that period, I think Heat of the Moment was the kind of banner song of Asia. That was the one that was most known.
Chris Squire and Alan White teamed up with new member Trevor Rabin and original Yes man Tony Kaye to form a group they were going to call Cinema. Trevor Rabin explains.
We went into the studio under that name, thinking in those terms rather than, you know, the guidelines of what a Yes album would be. But obviously the strong influence of Alan and Chris and was obviously there and would make it sound that way no matter what happened. But so there was a lot of freedom in doing what we wanted to do, because I hadn't joined Yes. We'd got this band together, and then John joined. So I was very lucky in that I wasn't asked, do you want to come and join Yes? Because then there would have been preconceived ideas of what it should or shouldn't be. Whereas this way I could bring songs which I'd written and ideas and styles which I obviously inherently have.
It was going out to cinema, and the songs were written for 90125. And I said to Chris, hey, listen, it can't be called Cinema. It's got to be called Yes, because there's a legion of fans out there waiting for Yes to return, and this is a brilliant album to start, you know, so why don't we just do it? And the album was a big, big success. So a lot of people that got very disheartened because of Yes's demise were sort of revitalized, I think.
I actually wrote that before I'd met the band, in fact, and funnily enough had taken it to various record companies, and nobody seemed to like it, and which is kind of funny, because when we finally did it, it was very, very similar to the demo. There's very little difference. In fact, John Anderson at one point pointed out to Trevor Horn, who was producing it, that, hey, this sounds exactly the same. You know, aren't you supposed to be changing it? And he said, no. Well, he said his response was, that's a compliment, because he liked the way it was. So it kind of stayed the way it was and never really changed from the time I wrote it.
Tony Kaye, he remembers.
Basically, with my conversations with Chris over the phone, was that he just wanted to see whether it would work. There was really no talk about Yes. It wasn't going to be Yes. The band wasn't going to be called Yes. There was no aspect of let's go back and try and make some money, you know, make money out of it as a kind of, just as a financial venture. It was basically let's just try and play together again.
When the heart rules the mind, Steve Howe remembers.
When we recorded it, we went about it pretty much the same as we went about everything else, which was quite detailed and quite gradual, kind of gradual layering up to the finished record. It was because the tempo's quite up. It's got the kind of energy that we'd like to think that, you know, it's the spearhead for the record.
Rhythm of Love. John Anderson comments.
It's a collective song. Rhythm of Love was written by Trevor. I wrote some of the lyrics for the verses and the choruses and stuff. It's a very strong song about, if you're losing things, if you cannot find a way to reason with yourself about your day-to-day times, you struggle with things and you get yourself into such a mess, you got to try very hard to tune into the rhythm of love, because the rhythm's very, very strong and it surrounds us. And I think that's the idea of the song, more or less.
There were two songs that I wrote and finished, and wasn't particularly thrilled with the idea of the band doing them, because I thought it would be... There were other songs that I thought would sound better within the band. It just turned out that Alan actually heard it and said, oh, I really like that. And I said, well, we can try it. So both those songs sort of came to the band without really being forced on the band.
John Anderson once again parted company with Yes. Anderson then teamed up with former bandmates Bill Bruford, Rick Wakeman, and Steve Howe. Anderson comments,
I've always been very proud to work with such fine musicians, and in the fact of working with them, I've started to develop my talents as a musician, and I play keyboards and I write different kinds of music, ethnic music, symphonic ideas, new age music, as you might call it, because it was part and parcel of growing up with really fine musicians like Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman, Bill Bruford, all these guys, you know.
Trevor Rabin has just released a solo project called Can't Look Away. On it, Trevor wrote or co-wrote all 12 tunes, plays every instrument except drums, and co-produced it along with Bob Ezrin. Rabin comments,
As a producer, I'm always, a producer's job is to produce something that's going to be commercially successful. That's the only job of a producer as far as record companies are concerned. I'm into the music, but at the same time, if you want to do something and have success and be able to do extensive major tours and have enough people at the tours to produce a production that's going to cost a lot of money, you have to have a hit record. And that doesn't mean to say that the concept of the album is going to suffer and that there's going to be music that's bland or, shallow because it's a hit single.
From the